Why are so many people today convinced that the God of the Bible does not condone and endorse slavery? Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the reality is that there's not a single syllable of the Bible that in any way, shape, or form whatsoever questions, problematizes, condemns, or even criticizes the practice itself of buying, selling, and owning other human beings. The best we have is some authors who suggest enslaved people should be treated better. But there is never any part of the Bible that actually criticizes or condemns the practice of slavery itself. It is always presupposed to be normative and to be perfectly fine. So what changed? Why are people today so convinced of the opposite? We changed our minds about what we thought was right. And we find some minority voices within early Judaism and early Christianity that condemn the practice, but they are drowned out by the consensus view that it is okay. And the Bible was a primary tool in that overruling of those minority voices. And then within medieval Islam, medieval Christianity, medieval Judaism, as we have the restoration of classical philosophical thought, which gives rise to the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the Enlightenment, the Bible begins to take a back seat to other concerns, and particularly human rights and natural law, natural theology, and things like that. Now, abolitionists absolutely use the Bible to defend their position, but pro-slavery folks also use the Bible, and the reality is that their reading is much closer to what was intended by the original authors and understood by the original audiences. It was actually the effacement of the role of the Bible as an authority that facilitated the overturning of the consensus view, which led to today's perspective that slavery is fundamentally evil. And so folks who understand the Bible to be authoritative and inspired and inerrant have had to renegotiate their relationship with those passages that condone and endorse slavery. And the three main tactics that have been taken in order to convince oneself that the Bible does not condone and endorse slavery is, one, to imagine that the Bible represents a more just and a more compassionate and a more merciful slavery than the slavery practiced around ancient Israel and Judah. And that's simply false. One can compare the legislation from ancient West Asia to the legislation in the Bible and see that while some laws are more just, others are less just, but the overwhelming majority are more or less the same. Another tactic has been to suggest that the passages in Exodus and in 1 Timothy that condemn kidnapping therefore condemn the slave trade, as if kidnapping is the only way that slaves were provisioned. And a close look at the texts of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament show not only that that's absolutely not true, but the prohibition on kidnapping in the Hebrew Bible only really applies to Israelite citizens, and in the New Testament it's talking about illegal slave trading. And then the third tactic is to argue for a kind of incrementalization, that God couldn't have Israel or Christianity quit slavery cold turkey, and so God had to slowly recondition them to reject slavery. Of course, that's not anywhere in the Bible. As I pointed out, while there are authors who argue that enslaved people need to be treated better, there's not a single syllable of the Bible that in any way, shape, or form whatsoever conditions anyone to think of the practice itself as immoral. So all three of those tactics ultimately fail if we're trying to understand what the authors of the Bible intended for their readership to understand and what their earliest audiences understood. If you're interested in a wonderful discussion of this process, as well as a critique of the argument that the Bible was the proximate cause of the abolition of slavery, I would highly recommend Hector Avalos' book, Slavery, Abolitionism, and the Ethics of Biblical Scholarship. And the fit for this video has been the classic Superman.